Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Acronis conference. Hope you all enjoyed the hype videos that we just had, a little bit of information on Acronis Cyber Foundation, and welcome to this live conference where you will see inside a live ransomware attack and then learn how to prevent all of them. I'm your host. I'm Pat Hurley. I'm the Vice President here at Americas. We'll kick off things in just a moment here, but before we do that, we'd like to start off with a little bit of housekeeping items. First of all, the conference is going to be recorded, so you do get to share this with friends, colleagues, family. Your microphone will be on mute, but that doesn't mean you can't interact with our team. We've got a number of solutions engineers and salespeople on the back end to answer any questions you might have throughout the event. So please feel free to submit your questions into the Q&A interface. I think I've already seen a few questions pop up there. We do have some time set aside later in the event for those that aren't answered in the Q&A interface. We'll answer them live on air. And either way, we do promise to follow up directly after the event with answers to all the questions that come up. So before we get into the actual live ransomware event, why don't we take a moment to respond to a quick poll, which today is based on a segment most of you are interested in. Thank you all for your participation in this. So I'll give you about 10 seconds or so to enter in your answer. Which of today's segments is of most interest to you? Is it the live demonstration of a real ransomware attack? Is it the latest news on what's happening with ransomware? Is it how to develop your ransomware defense checklist? Or are you looking to see a demo of how you actually prevent it with something called Acronis Cyber Protect? So we'll go ahead and we'll close down that poll. Thank you all for participating in that. Next up, we will get into the actual session here where we will actually demonstrate that live ransomware attack. So we're going to start by showing you this live attack in action. It will not only provide you with a revealing look on the biggest malware threat that businesses face today, but also how to provide protection against it. We're going to have all of our panelists today talking about this phenomenon, which we are all too commonly familiar with, called ransomware. I'm going to introduce you in a moment here to Topher Thibault. He's going to take you through this demonstration. He's a senior cybersecurity analyst for Acronis. He's been doing malware research for 6 years at Acronis and at SiteLock before that, and has another 7 years of experience in IT support and operations. So Topher, over to you.
Thank you, Pat. Excited to be here and to share this live ransomware demo with you guys. Let's go ahead and I'll pull up this machine and we can dive in. Now, as we all know, ransomware attacks can be fairly complex. Because of this, I do have a few things in place to monitor what's going on here. Just to make it simple on us, I have Process Monitor that I have filtered to just look at what's happening in the registry. And then below that, I have Process Explorer that will tell us the processes that the applications running on this system are using at any given time. Of course, we have to have our files to be ransomed and our trusty attack vector, the TurboTax order confirmation email. As you can see, this is a completely legit email. Pretty sure we can trust this. Let's go ahead and go into our view order details. It looks like that downloads a file. Let's go ahead and open this. And we can see already WinWord opening up. Lots of WinWord in the Process Monitor. Process Explorer is showing us WinWord down there as well. And oh, hey, Conti just showed up. Conti, of course, is a ransomware that we've seen a lot of in the news recently, including the recent attacks on Ireland's Health Service Executive and Department of Health. All of our file extensions just changed. Nothing seems to be what it was a moment ago. A readme.txt file just showed up. Let's go ahead and take this shot list Excel document and see if we can get it to open. We'll just change this file extension to see if we can turn it back into an actual Excel document. Things are a little bit slow now that the ransomware is running on this machine. We do see Excel opening up. While this is happening, let's go ahead and open this readme.txt file and see what this is all about. This is our ransom note. Essentially, most ransom notes anymore, this is what they're going to look like. Gone are the days of the flashy desktop background being replaced with some scary image or a website being opened with lots of low quality GIFs. What you get now is just a basic text file and some information on how to contact the attackers to negotiate or pay your ransom. Here we have the Excel document starting to open. And of course, it's not actually an Excel document because it's been encrypted. This means that if we want any chance of opening this file, we either need to restore it from a backup or get the decryption key. Let's go ahead and swap over to our second machine here. Now this machine is protected, but it is essentially the same setup. It is a clone of the first machine. The only difference is that I have installed Acronis Cyber Protect on here. We do have the files to be encrypted, hopefully not. And with the process monitor, process explorer, and our ransom email again as well. Same thing, looks like it's downloading the file. Go ahead and open it and see if anything changes this time. Again, WinWord is opening up. We'll take a look and see if things are going the same or a little bit different this time around. Looks like Conti is still running. And Conti just closed. Our document opens. So okay, now we're seeing this is a little bit different this time around. We actually have a document. We have Conti closing rather quickly. Let's go ahead and take a look at what happened here. Now, Conti's no longer running in the Process Explorer, and we have an alert in the Cyber Protect console. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. At the top, basically, we have some information about the machine, the program that was closed, and the fact that the process has been stopped and file changes have been reverted. And down here, we can see that the process certificate was not valid and the binary format was changed for several files, which are listed below, and they were reverted using the cache. Now, switching over to machine number 3, we have the same TurboTax order confirmation email. And let's see what happens when we've got URL filtering running on this machine. Oh, look, you don't even get the malware in the first place because it was blocked by the URL filtering. So that's basically what we've got for you as far as seeing the live ransomware attack. Obviously, these things can happen very fast, and detection has to be faster, and stopping that attack needs to happen right away. Thank you, Pat. Back to you.
Thanks, Topher. Really interesting stuff. It's probably the last thing anybody wants to actually see is it taking over, but it's good to know that you know what you're up against and you know how to protect against it. Quick look here at the agenda. We've got the latest ransomware news coming up next. I'll introduce our latest and greatest addition to the team. Actually, you've been here a while now, Candid, so I feel like you've been introduced by me plenty of times. But we're going to take a step back from the inner workings of that actual ransomware attack, and we're going to look at the broader trends in ransomware. To take you through that, Candid Woost, our VP of Cyber Protection Research at Acronis, where he now researches new threat trends and comprehensive protection methods. Previously, Candid worked more than 16 years as the tech lead for Symantec's global security response team, a widely published author, a social media favorite on security topics, a frequent speaker at really big events and conferences, certainly security conferences like RSA and Area 41. He's now part of our team. We're very glad to have him. We'll pass it over to you, Candid, to talk about the latest in ransomware news. Take it away.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Pat. And yeah, I'm delighted to talk about some of the threats that we see. And I mean, I probably could update this slide every week, right? Because there is so much ransomware attacks going on. We've already seen more than 2,500 companies who have been compromised, and their data has been published on underground leaking sites. Most of you probably still remember the Colonial Pipeline attack in the US, where the DarkSide ransomware managed to compromise the, well, let's say headquarter of the Colonial Pipeline, managed to compromise the billing service among a few other servers, so that Colonial actually then shut down the pipelines, resulting in, not enough petrol going to some of the different states, 14 at the time, and of course, meaning that there was some panic as well, the petrol prices increased, so it can have real life consequences. For the company, it also had consequences because, yes, not only were their systems down for about a week, they also, of course, lost about 100 gigabytes of data. They were challenged by a 5 million ransom, and they decided to pay it. But then they actually found out that the decryption would still take a few more weeks because it's not really designed to be fast, right? So that's kind of the point where, yes, you have to revert back to your backup, and probably better to have a disaster recovery plan that works. Of course, the FBI managed to get their hands on some of the Bitcoins that have been paid. Due to the current prices, it's only about 2.5 million. I mean, better than nothing, but don't rely on the FBI to get the money back. Better not to be able or not to require to pay in the first place. We also had different university in England being attacked. Portsmouth or other universities have been down for 1-2 weeks. Here for Portsmouth, it was 25,000 students who were not able to take some of their tests, do some of the trainings. So that can have some real consequences as well. On the other hand, Topher already mentioned with the Conti ransomware going after healthcare sector, for example, the health service executive in Ireland, which is responsible for a few hospitals. So they had to cancel appointments, send non-life-threatening incidents back home because they were not able to get access to their systems. Here, it was 700 gigabytes of data which was stolen and $20 million that they wanted. Probably the kind of whole media attention that they got in the end resulted in Conti actually providing a free decryption tool for the company. Some people say, yeah, maybe they felt bad. It's probably just that they didn't really want the same attention that the dark side group received in the US. But even if you receive one, do you really trust it? You need to analyze it, right? Because maybe it's just a joke and it's actually wiping all your data. And unfortunately, in Ireland, the data was still stolen, and attackers still misused that data then to send personalized spam messages afterwards for all the people who got, well, ransomed or kind of victimized by the data leak. Of course, it's in all the sectors and in all the, let's say, global regions that we see it. So there was a rival attack against the Justice Tribunal of the state of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, where there is a lot of interesting information you can imagine, right? So they, of course, don't really want to pay the 5 million, but do you really want to have legal documents being available for everyone on the internet? And the last one is, yes, even insurance companies who actually insure against those things might fall victim to ransomware. And CNA in the US, in the end, paid $40 million in ransom to get back, well, some of their systems and not having their data published on the underground. So there's a global phenomenon, but we also saw that they changed some of their tactics, right? So of course they abuse your environment. They try to uninstall antivirus and security tools. They try to delete your backups just to make your life more miserable and making it a lot harder to get back. But they also use the so-called living off the land techniques and tactics, which means that they will take what's ever already on your site, already installed, and use it against you. So this could be PowerShell or any of the over 100 certified Microsoft executables that can be used for bad things. But sometimes they also try to use, well, software distribution to distribute their ransomware, or use backup software to exfiltrate the data by just creating a new backup to a new target, which will then exfiltrate the data. So they come up with new ideas. They, of course, also increase the pressure. We already talked about the double extortion, so stealing the information. So even if you do have a backup which works, and hopefully you do, well, your data is still gone, right? So that's not really good. They might threaten with GDPR or any privacy regulation fines that will happen. We've seen that they started contacting the end customers and telling, hey, by the way, this financial organization, they just got compromised. Maybe give them a ring and tell them to pay the ransom, otherwise your personal information will be leaked. So you're generating a lot more kind of hostility against the victim. And of course, to top it off, they also use distributed denial of service attack to keep the team busy. They're also expanding, right? Everyone just thinks, oh, it's happening to the big companies out there, it's Windows focused, but that's not true. Anyone can be a victim of ransomware. You only just read about the big ones in the news, but smaller, mid-sized companies do fall victims as well, unfortunately. Also, manufacturing and kind of OT environments are in the crosshairs of the ransomware attackers by now. And of course, yes, service providers, because through them, they can scale and attack all the customers of the service provider, kind of making even more profit. And it's regardless of if it's Windows, Linux, Mac, or cloud environment, there are ransomware attacks possible on all of those. So you need to be protected. And make no mistake about it, the attackers, they know your infrastructure, probably even better than you. We've seen some cases where the attackers read the cyber insurance policies and then suggested, hey, please pay us 6 million because we know you're insured for 6 million, so you don't even have to pay it, right? It's out of the pocket of the insurer. So they will know where it actually hurts you, but they also propose afterward that it's like a penetration test, right? So they will give you tips on how to increase your resilience, how to protect, but quite frankly, it's just a very expensive penetration test, so rather leave that to the professionals to begin with. And of course, yes, once they're on site, they do different things. They might change passwords, they might reboot into safe mode so that the security solution might not be working anymore. We've seen some which download a virtual image, like a virtual box, and then map all the drives inside this virtual machine and start encrypting it from there. So from the host, it looks like it's a trusted environment which starts encrypting all your files. So they come with all different nuisances and new ideas. And of course, they make use of all the tools which are available, like Cobalt Strike, a very common backdoor that we see even with nation state actors, but of course also with the ransomware gangs. Or they use tools like rclone to just replicate the data into the cloud and therefore exfiltrating your data. And I probably could be talking for hours and hours, but I think that's what the panel is for. So that's it for me from now, and give it back to Pat.
Excellent. Thank you, Candid. Informative as always. Really appreciate it. I think the key takeaway for me is hope is not a strategy, right? You got to have a plan. And that's what the next panel is for. We're going to talk about how to develop your ransomware defense checklist and put it obviously certainly beyond just hoping you don't get attacked or hoping you have a valid backup. So thank you for that. We're getting a lot of questions in Zoom, so continue to ask those questions there. We'll continue to answer them live. We'll hopefully get to some of them at the end. All questions will be answered. We're going to pivot now to the panel. I'm going to introduce our next guest. It's our moderator, James Slaby. He's the director of cyber protection at Acronis, worked for decades in engineering and marketing, various roles across cybersecurity and networking vendors. He's an industry analyst at places like Forrester Research, covering cybersecurity and networking issues. Now we've got him here at Acronis, and we're very glad to have him. Over to you, James, with the panel. Thank you.
I have the easy job today. I've just got to take an extraordinary panel of veteran cybersecurity pros through a series of questions where we're going to kick around this topic of what you do about the kind of ransomware attack that Topher showed us earlier. So you've already been introduced to Topher Thibault, senior cybersecurity analyst, and Candid Verst, our VP of cyber protection research. Let me introduce you to our external guests. I'm particularly honored to welcome Graham Cluley, not just because he's a kind of a world-renowned cybercrime expert and a very in-demand researcher and consultant, but in particular, I'm thrilled because he's the host of the Smashing Security podcast, which is kind of a destination listen for me every week. It not only keeps me up to date on the latest goings on in the cybersecurity world, ransomware is a frequent topic on that show, but he and his co-host, Carol Theriault, who you might remember from Acronis Global Cyber Summit speaking appearances, are enormously entertaining. So I urge you to subscribe to the Smashing Security podcast. Graham also has a widely followed security blog at the helpfully named grahamcluley.com. Our other panelist is Dylan Pollock. He's a senior network administrator engineer at Hendrick Motorsports, where he brings 10 years of experience to all sorts of IT operations roles in racing. If you're not familiar with Hendrick, they're one of Acronis's coolest partners, and it's not just because they're one of the winningest teams in NASCAR history, but motorsports in general, NASCAR in particular, is one of the most data-driven professional sports in the world. So having these guys use our solutions really pushes us to our limits with the volume and the criticality, the real-time nature of the data that they're using. They're really a kind of a great showcase for what our technology can do. So we're really grateful to have them as a customer. All right, with that, let's jump into our panel questions. Let's see. We might as well start off with what we kind of promised our audience right here, which is a kind of a checklist for building your ransomware defense plan. I don't want to worry too much about the order of this. I'm going to capture all of this listening to the recording and share it with our attendees later on. But let's try to run off a kind of a top 5 or 6 issues that you need to worry about if you're building a ransomware defense strategy. Who wants to start?
I'm happy to start if you like.
By all means, Graham.
Well, I'm going to take the easy one, right? I'm going to start off with what I hope everybody is doing, but absolutely has to happen, which is, how about let's take some backups. Let's make some backups of our valuable data. So if anything bad does happen, whether it be ransomware, some natural disaster or whatever, we've got a backup, we've kept it securely. And of course, it's a backup that works, something which we can actually recover from in a prompt fashion. We have seen ransomware victims in the past who've decided to pay the ransom, even though they have a backup, because they found they simply weren't able to roll out their backup in a timely fashion or didn't have much confidence in it. So I think that's one thing which you want to have in your back pocket. There's plenty of other ways, of course, of preventing the infection from happening in the first place.
Yeah, no one on the Acronis side of the panel is going to object to that one. Dylan, any thoughts here?
No, backups are definitely your main line of defense against ransomware. I would say training is a big one. Training users how to identify the suspicious emails and files that are coming in. That's a huge one. If you can stop that, I think that prevents a lot of ransomware potential.
That's great stuff, Dylan. Topher, you want to jump in with your kind of one of your key checklist items for building a ransomware defense? I think you're on mute still, Topher.
Sorry about that. I
there we go.
Do that from time to time. Obviously, both those last two were excellent suggestions, and anything you can do to prevent the ransom in the first place is fantastic. And of course, I feel like, especially after my demo, I would be remiss to not mention having some sort of protection in place to detect and stop the ransomware as it happens, and be able to automate the reverting back to the original files.
Yeah, I mean, maybe adding there on the classical prevention side, and I guess we can go into that in more details as well. We should probably also have the patching of exposed services, right? We've seen in the past the on-prem Microsoft Exchange server, Pulse VPN, Citrix, and I mean, all of the things which we're using now, because yes, we might not be in the office, they will be attacked, right? So they have to be patched. Yesterday was Patch Tuesday, right? So make sure that you get those as soon as possible, quicked out, hopefully automated way. And the other one is, of course, passwords, right? I mean, Colonial Pipeline, they got attacked through a leaked password, which was not really the best way to get owned, right? So make sure that
it was a very complicated password.
Yes, that's the problem. Even a complicated password, if it falls into the hands of phishers because you follow a link and give it in, or because it's leaked through another leak, right? Being it Facebook, LinkedIn, and all of the others which had millions of data already leaked before, then it doesn't matter how complex it is. So better add second factor, like multi-factor authentication, make sure that you're actually using unique passwords for different services and so on, or maybe not even exposing those services completely for everyone, but actually limiting it. But I actually want to talk about one thing, which is not really the prevention, but back to your original question on preparing the incident response plan, right? One thing which a lot of people overlook is having the list of all the people that you need to contact, even the ones internally. And I'm not talking about having an internal wiki page, because that one will be encrypted. So do you actually know how to contact your sysadmins, right? Because your email server might be down. Your internal address book might be down. I've seen so many companies struggling just to find the right people. And I mean, losing 2 hours to find where your sysadmin is probably not the time you should spend, right? So think it through. And as Graham said, probably test as well. Can you do it? Can you restore it? That will definitely help.
I think Candid's got some great points there. We've seen so many ransomware incidents where the corporate victim has ended up communicating with their staff via something like WhatsApp or social media. And that's the other thing. How are you going to communicate with your customers and partners? Because your website may be inaccessible. You may not be able to update it any longer. And so you may need to use your social media channels as well. And sometimes there's a lot of value in having people's contact details written down on a piece of paper rather than on an internal wiki. So you can refer to that when you need to. But absolutely, with the number and the scale of the ransomware attacks which are happening now, maybe it's time to play a few war games inside the office, do it one weekend or whatever, and say, okay, let's imagine this has happened today. How are we going to do this? How are we going to communicate? What are we going to say to our customers and partners? How are we going to minimize the disruption which is caused by this attack?
Yeah,
Well, I was just going to say, I never thought I'd see the day when cybersecurity experts were telling me it was okay to keep certain valuable information on sticky notes by my monitor, but that's all good.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
sorry, I interrupted here.
It sounds counterintuitive, but yes, I've seen it multiple times as well, that the sysadmins actually changed the domain administrator passwords, send it out by emails to all the others, but the bad guys were still listening in to the emails, right? So that's not how you get rid of them. So yes, do the test, as Graham said, and then get a checklist, which means that once you are on the stress, you can just follow the stress, follow the checklist and have less stress. Because of course, first rule is, as always, don't panic. That's not going to help anyone, right? And you're rather going to make mistakes.
It's the hardest thing to do, right? Not panic.
And make sure that you put it all into a... Sorry about that. And make sure that you put it all into an incident response plan too. You want to make sure that you have it clearly outlined, not just simply, here's our contact list and everything else we have to do from memory.
All right, I'm going to continue to kind of capture these kind of points and assemble them into our checklist. But I want to move on to some other questions here. So, Candid, you talked about the use of double extortion attacks, where the attackers are actually exfiltrating sensitive data before they trigger the encryption attack. So they've got the extra weapon of, well, you can go ahead and try to recover your data on your own, but we will still leak it online and cause you all kinds of problems that way. Do you think the panel that this is kind of the wave of the future, that encryption attacks are going to become recede as an extortion tactic? Where do you see the world going there?
I think it will be a kind of a hybrid or combination. I mean, we see a lot of specialization. Some groups like Babuk, they mentioned, I think in April this year, that they will stop with the encryption and just focus on data theft because it's still, let's say, profitable enough for them, right? And in the end, money is, let's say, 99% what's the motivation for them, right? DarkSide made about 90 million, 90. Well, now minus 2.5, but still a lot of money, right? But I think they won't kind of distort the ideas of encryption. They will just adaptively select where it makes sense, right? Why should they throw it away if it still works? And for some organizations like manufacturing, they might not have too much information which is so critical if it's leaked, but if you can bring down a manufacturing line, that's going to cost a lot of money, right? So I'd say depending on the group, they will specialize, which makes it even more dangerous because they will adapt. And as I say, they will hit you where it hurts the most.
I agree with that. I think we've only seen the tip of the iceberg as far as the double extortion attacks with the exfiltration and stealing of data and then the encryption. I don't see any reason why ransomware groups will give up leverage that they have with the encryption portion of the attack. But I wouldn't be surprised if they moved strictly to theft either, depending upon the group, like you said.
And maybe, as we said earlier, surprisingly, still a lot of people don't have a working backup or a working disaster recovery. So encrypting still works as a deterrent, right? So yeah, as Dylan says, why wouldn't they use it if it works for them?
I actually remember one US city which got hit by ransomware. I think it was a year or two ago. And the head of IT, the mayor went on television and said, we are not going to pay the ransom because we've got backups we're going to recover from. And the head of IT confirmed this. And then they went to look at their backups, and it turned out their backup method was to copy people's files into a different folder on the same hard drive. So yes, they had a backup, but a useless one.
It's not the most robust approach. I want to move on to another topic here. There's a philosophy that says you should assume at some point that you're going to be breached, get hit by a ransomware attack. Many of them are enabled with sort of worm-like capabilities that allow them to spread throughout the network. What kind of prophylactic kind of steps would you recommend as a countermeasure to that kind of propagation through the company network if you do get breached by a ransomware attack?
So my recommendation would be that you should really be segmenting your network, and you should be only giving people access rights and privileges to access the data and the parts of the network which they need. And there are too many occasions when sometimes we see organizations where staff have extraordinary rights to career around almost everywhere. And it's, if you begin to lock that down, which makes sense from the security point of view generally, not just from the ransomware point of view, it's going to help you a lot with insider threats as well, I would hope. So if you do that, the ransomware only has, unless it manages to exploit some kind of vulnerability to escalate its privileges, it only has the privileges of the user whose computer it has infected. And it's only if it's able to go further than that, or that user has more access than maybe they should have done, that the malware really begins to cause a wider problem.
Yeah, I fully agree. Network segmentation definitely helps. And actually, machines rarely have to connect to other users' machines, right? Usually to a printer, to a file server, but not kind of beneath each other. So segmentation can definitely work. And yes, on the password hygiene, I mean, the classical thing that they do is using tools like Mimikatz to dump the passwords from memory from a Windows system. And if it's, let's say, an older system, again, it doesn't matter if it's a complex password, they can actually get the hash or sometimes even the clear text password from the local memory. So if you have a domain admin with a static password logging into all the machines, that's kind of handing over the golden keys to the city, right? So make sure that you use, for example, one-time passwords for domain admins. And as Graham said, not everyone needs to be an admin. Everyone wants to be an admin, but they certainly don't need to, right?
All right, I want to move on to another subject that seems to be constantly in the news. Every industry event I go to, it seems to be half the vendors are talking about it. And certainly it's a subject that Acronis talks about, which is the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence, what we call machine intelligence, to aid and abet our ability to respond to attacks in real time, adaptively, effectively counter zero-day threats. How do you see the bad guys taking advantage of these technologies, and how should we be thinking about how to counter the use of ML AI in attack mode?
Loaded question.
Yeah, I know it's a tough one. I like, for instance, I saw a recent story where the analyst was suggesting that AI is useful when phishers are scanning social media to glean information about someone so that they can craft a more carefully targeted phishing email. I know I've gotten emails that that nearly duped me, clearly phishing on closer scrutiny. But at first it looked like it was just a fundraising solicitation from my college alumni association, which I get a lot of. But this one was just a little bit off. But they clearly did some scanning of my public profile. I don't know if they needed AI to do that, but I imagine that if you're doing it at scale, that's one example, is sort of scaling up targeted phishing attacks. Any other thoughts there?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of automation, as you say. I mean, the ransomware attacks, they're still kind of human operated by now. They use a lot of preparation for scanning the internet, scanning for vulnerable services, which of course are scripts and automated. Sometimes it's even a different group doing the work. And then once inside, they can use tools like Bloodhound, or as I mentioned, other tools to find out where's the weak passwords, where can they spread further. But usually it's still human operated. And you can definitely compare it to a penetration test, right? One of those assessments. They're done by humans as well. I mean, yes, you can automate a lot of it, but at the moment, it's not that you have the Terminator, Skynet kind of coming in and do everything. But they don't even have to, right? Because yes, they're still successful. They can adapt to all the things, finding the crown jewels. So I don't see too much of the artificial intelligence being used on the offensive side at the moment, apart from automation for, yes, reinforced learning for phishing emails and so on. But I think it's important to see that we are using it on the defense side. And maybe Topher, you want to go into how we are threat agnostic in detecting ransomware, right? Because in your sample, the demo, it was not detected by a signature, but actually by AI.
Right, and that's where AI can be trained to look for, the signals that might not be something that we can just simply write a signature for, or some basic detection. The AI, it's going to recognize patterns, and what is this doing, and is it is it actually modifying files, and how fast is it modifying files? There's a lot that goes into it, but the AI can be trained to make a determination of, at least, hey, this looks a little fishy, or what, this is doing enough of this stuff that it's absolutely this is bad. This is too many files have been changed, they're no longer accessible, they're deleted, whatever the case may be. So that's where the AI comes in on the kind of the detection and defense side, is the things that it's going to be able to find way faster than just a random script or a person looking at logs.
Yeah, I believe as we continue using AI on the defense side, I mean, there's more and more opportunity for the attackers to be able to use AI as well. Where I was going with that.
That's all right. We have so many topics to cover in such a short time. I don't mind moving on here, Dylan. This is a question I wrote earlier, but has been echoed by one of our attendees here. So I think it's a good one to get to, which is, the short version of the question is, are the feds coming to save us, or our national governments in general? Historically, between the use of cryptocurrencies and operating out of countries beyond the extradition reach of authorities, and just a general, I would say, lack of attention to the issue, businesses haven't had much luck in looking to the federal government or federal law enforcement for a lot of help or relief when they get attacked, or in kind of shoring up our defenses. We had a rare example recently of DarkSide saying, like, oh, sorry, we didn't realize we were attacking critical infrastructure there. Our bad, we're going to go away now, if you believe that. But then earlier this week, we found out that the feds managed to claw back a few $1 million in Bitcoin from the attackers. So that seems like a glimmer of hope for some government assistance in fighting the threat. How optimistic are you that that's going to be something we can expect to see more of going forward?
I think the recent attacks against the pipeline, against the meat processing plant, the fact that this has made headline news has inevitably got the attention of government, and they care about this because it looks bad if they don't do anything, right? I think there were obviously people in power who did care about this before, but it really has become accentuated in the last year or so. So it's become more serious than ever before. The challenge, however, is that many of these ransomware gangs are effectively operating from a safe harbor. They are operating from countries overseas where the powers that be in those countries are turning a blind eye to them, just as long as they don't attack anyone on their home soil. And you see that to such an extent that some ransomware is programmed not to infect, not to activate on computers, which it identifies as being, for instance, Russian, just to pull a country out of thin air.
Yeah, there's a handful of obvious sources, right?
Yes, yeah, there are a few. And I think that's really difficult. That combined with the fact that we have cryptocurrency. In the old days, it was always a case of follow the money, and that just ain't so easy with cryptocurrency and recovering the money. I mean, what on earth the FBI did to recover some of that money from the colonial pipe? They must have got their hands on the private key somehow, and that leads to all kinds of questions as to how they managed to get the private key of that cryptocurrency wallet. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out one day.
Maybe the bad guys were using that fake secure messaging app that was actually an FBI plant.
Maybe they were. So, I mean, but fundamentally, we need to get governments around the world agreeing that this is something which we want to crack down on. But I don't have a huge amount of confidence that there won't be some parts of the world, we can all probably think of some, which won't really care about this. And there are some parts of the world which are pretty actively engaged in organizing ransomware attacks as well.
I'm pretty sure Kim Jong-un doesn't have many options for revenue these days outside of cybercrime. So,
yeah, I think I echo as well. I mean, for the Colonial Pipeline, the warrants that I've seen show, or rather, let's say some mistakes in DevSecOps on the attacker side, that yes, they were using rented servers where the private keys were stored. Otherwise, they probably would not have lost their Bitcoins. But I think as well that those cases, of course, help to raise the awareness. And with that, of course, also to start disrupting the business model, because that's in the end what you need to do, right? On one end, we need to do awareness, still and sad. There are still people clicking on every parcel delivery email that they receive and kind of falling for Nigerian prince, hoping to send some millions over, right? That maybe we can reduce with some awareness training, but on the other hand, we need to disrupt the business model. Me personally, I don't think that banning Bitcoin, well, A, it's not possible, but B, even if it would be, it won't solve it because, well, then they move to Monero or Dogecoin or any of the others, right? I mean, that's not going to help. And as you said, in the end, it's a global phenomenon. So yes, it won't help. But I don't want to be on the side of saying, oh, we cannot do anything, so we shouldn't do anything, right? I mean, we should not give up the fight. We should definitely raise the bar and make it more difficult for them to get to the money in the end, and kind of not make it too easy for them. But yes, I don't think that we will solve the ransomware issue this year. So unfortunately, we still need to be prepared for them next year.
All right, we're down to not a whole lot of time left here. I know we touched on the subject of incident response planning, and I spend a lot of time, besides focusing on cybersecurity, here on disaster recovery at Acronis. So I'm certainly a big believer in incident response planning and management. You know, the assumption that maybe you don't have Acronis and you won't have a ransomware attack automatically detected and stopped. And so you've got to deal with the consequences of it. I know that we touched on the idea of sort of security awareness training and drilling, but what else do you see as the kind of key components of a ransomware incident response plan?
Well, I think
the first portion, go ahead.
Well, hope I am not stealing, because I was referring to your point as well, kind of the communication. So internal communication as well as external one, right? And not just talking about who do you need to inform about some accidents, but also kind of how do you communicate with your customers, right? How do you communicate with your board of directors? And do you actually wake up the CEO at 2 o'clock in the morning or not? I mean, that has to be defined somewhere, and probably it's better if you define it first and not kind of learn it the hard way when he's not going to be happy. So I think communication has to be in your incident response plan and should be there, definitely defined.
Yeah, that's a huge key component of it that's definitely overlooked, I believe, like you said earlier. Because answering these questions, I certainly didn't even think about communication as being one. I mean, so it's easily overlooked.
And we're not talking about your privacy is important to us, right? I mean,
we take security very seriously.
Exactly. We've seen all of those, and then a day later they change it and say, oh, yes, unfortunately, some data has been stolen, right? So you need to have the story straight.
Yep.
And maybe another one to throw in there is change the passwords. I've seen many times as well that they restore the backups, keep the same passwords, and surprise, surprise, a week later, they're compromised again.
Yeah.
I know people don't like to learn new passwords, but after an incident, you definitely should change everything.
And the other thing I would suggest is learn from other companies' situations and their experiences. This doesn't have to be a disaster for your company. There are some companies who've handled a ransomware attack very, very well. And in fact, if anything, they've improved their reputation afterwards. I'm thinking, for instance, of Norsk Hydro, who got hit. A lot of their sites got shut down as a consequence, but their communications were open, transparent, informative. They never for a second considered paying the ransom, and they said that early on. And they handled it, and they came out smelling wonderful from the experience. So look at those kind of organizations. Some of them have written up, some of them have given presentations consequently about what they did. Watch those before the attack hits you. So maybe you can emulate some of their successes.
That's a good point, Graham.
Right.
I think we've seen a lot of wide open attack vectors on a lot of these attacks, and I think you can close a lot of those just by looking at the information that comes from those attacks. Changing passwords, doing the simple stuff. A lot of that's prevented just by doing the simple stuff.
Right. And one thing with an incident response plan too, is it should not be a set it and forget it kind of thing. It's something that should be revisited regularly. And so when you see, to Graham's point, other companies go through an incident, look at what they did and see if there's a way that it applies to your organization and update your plan.
Yep. It should be constantly evolving. I'd agree.
Yeah. And wasn't there an incident in the UK where a company actually paid, they got back, and then they got compromised again because they didn't do the lessons learned. They actually did not update and fix the way they come in, right? So as you say, if you have, let's say, the quote unquote opportunity to learn, please, by all means, do so and improve.
Well, gents, I had about a dozen more questions for you, but I think we're out of time for the panel discussion. Again, I'm going to capture your nuggets of wisdom for the promised ransomware response plan. Some audience questions I think might also contribute to that. We've got a couple of good ones here. The cyber attackers keep coming up with new ways of attacking since they have access to the latest security solutions and are able to work through them. The security solution is always behind. How can we get a full, I'm going to say that they mean foolproof security system? In other words, what's the answer here when it feels like the bad guys are always a step ahead and we're always reacting?
Well, I mean,
I think it's a little unfair actually on some of the security solutions to say that. I think the security solutions generally do a pretty good job, and many of them have adapted to the ransomware threat to look at things like the behavior of the processes which are running on the computer to see if they might be ransomware-like. So even if it isn't a piece of ransomware they've ever encountered before, they could quite easily or quite possibly give you some kind of warning as to what's going on. And it's not a case of just putting in one layer of protection, but you can have multiple layers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it used to be a cat and mouse game with the signatures 20 years ago, right? But now that you have multiple layers with pre-execution, with machine learning, machine intelligence, that of course helps to exactly go after the behavior and harden your systems, right? So if you want to protect your files from getting encrypted, there are only a few ways of how to encrypt files. And if you can block those, well, then even if they know how you do it, it's not going to help them too much on getting past them. Unfortunately, as we saw, yeah, if they find your password, that's still going to be good enough. So I usually think the security solutions are not the weakest link. So yes, we are constantly improving those, but I think patching, strong passwords, email security, those are the ways where you should invest before you go for the very kind of new assistance on which solution is better.
All right, I'm going to kind of aggregate a couple of questions here because it seems like there's a common thread in them, but it's basically, I agree that backups are an essential component for ransomware response, but with mean time to detection of malicious software still hovering around 6+ months, controversial statement, I'd say, it seems that there is still a real risk of even your backups being contaminated with some type of event or a time-driven payload trigger. Training people on recognizing the signs of malicious software phishing attempts and utilizing HPAM. What is next? What does an exercise look like? So I think some of our audience has a sense that like we're saying like backup is the answer to all your problems, and that's clearly not where we're coming from. But you know, what exactly are the approaches that we're recommending that go beyond keeping good backups, which is something we've been saying for 20 years.
Keeping good off-site encrypted backups.
So I would say I couldn't agree with you more, Dylan. But I think what the attendee here is asking is, what measures are we recommending beyond backup to defend against ransomware?
Gotcha.
I think I get the sense that we've been talking not too much about backup and not about more cybersecurity focused measures.
Yeah, I think we've mentioned some of these things already. Get yourself a good antivirus solution, make sure it's updated, keep yourself patched, segment your network, have security solutions as well, which are looking for common exploits and behavioral strangeness, which may be going on in your computers. You may want to have some kind of data loss prevention solution on as well to prevent suspicious exfiltration of large amounts of data from your network. Multi-factor authentication, enterprise password management. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, maybe adding visibility to it as well, right? Only if you know about your systems, you can also protect them. So there needs to be a way of discovering them, to manage them, to actually know that you have data in the cloud and maybe ingest the log files from there, right? So the tools are available. And yes, I would say Graham covered the best practices that you should do to have a strong foundation. You can also follow NIST recommendations or other frameworks, which have a clear, good guideline for SMBs, for large enterprises to help you get started. The point is, you have to get started.
Gents, I could spend another hour kicking this topic around with you, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Audience, if we didn't get to your questions, my apologies, but we will follow up with you directly afterwards. I saw one about confronting call center scammers. I thought that was a little off topic for our discussion, but we have opinions about that, and we will respond. I want to thank my panel, Candid West, Topher Thibault, Dylan Pollock, Graham Cluley. Thank you so much for your incredible expertise. I'm going to try to distill it into kind of a short checklist for our audience to send afterwards. But we got to move on to the next portion of the event. And so I want to hand it back to Pat Hurley.
James, echo your sentiments there. Topher, Candid, Graham, Dylan, fantastic work. Really interesting panel. We're going to transition now to the final 5 minutes or so of our agenda. I'm going to pass it over to Colin Apodak. He is my manager for solution engineering here in the Americas. We'll pass over to Colin to a quick demo of Acronis Cyber Protect. Over to you, Colin.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Pat. And again, I just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists. That was really, really insightful. And also thank you, Topher, for showing us that live ransomware demo earlier. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take you through a quick overview of the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud. So let's go ahead and hop into the console.
The overview dashboard provides you and your team with an up-to-date view of key performance indicators for all of your assets that are being protected by the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud, which can be customized by selecting from our comprehensive selection of prepackaged widgets, which provides your team with key insights and a visual representation of your cyber protection status. It's becoming increasingly difficult to remain in the know on emerging threats. Our integrated threat feed displays threats that are relevant for your IT environment, which is populated by our Cyber Protection Operations Center. This also includes things like weather events or other natural disasters that may impact your organization. From there, we provide you with recommended actions that can be executed with a single click, providing you with auto remediation with minimal effort. Agent installation is a breeze with our intuitive machine discovery feature, which allows you to install a single agent in your environment and utilize its access to quickly deploy agents to all of your supported IT assets, and immediately apply a protection plan to keep your users' data safe and secure. Want to deploy via a GPO? Not a problem. We provide you with documentation that shows you how to quickly and effectively deploy our agents via Active Directory or the package manager of your choosing, providing you with immediate cyber protection. We're constantly evolving our cyber protection platform to address the ever-changing needs of our customers. We do this by delivering every function and feature through a unified platform that leverages a single agent and a protection plan that encompasses all of your environment's needs. One of these features is our continuous data protection, which protects application metadata or files and folders in between scheduled backups. The days of the CEO losing his critical spreadsheet are long gone, leading to increased operational efficiency and limiting potential downtime due to data loss. No backup and security strategy is complete without encryption. By enabling this option, we give you the ability to set a zero trust password that will be encrypted with either AES 256, 192, or 128, keeping your archives and your data safe and secure from potential bad actors. Is your organization bound by strict compliance standards by a governing body? If so, we provide you with the ability to capture forensic backups, which will include a whole disk capture comprised of both used and unallocated disk space, as well as a raw memory dump and a snapshot of running processes, which can then be imported into any off-the-shelf forensic auditing tool for analysis. We can all agree that forensic backups are good for analysis after an event, but what can we do about proactive protection? With the Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud, we provide you with intuitive URL filtering based on categories that includes automatic blocking of known malware sites by leveraging data collected by our Cyber Protection Operations Center. If malware still finds its way into your environment, we provide you with best-in-breed zero-day ransomware protection through our innovative AI ML-based active protection. That, coupled with our industry-leading AV and anti-malware, and you have an airtight cyber protection platform that will lead to less emergencies at 2 a.m. and more restful nights. Everyone has heard of horror stories pertaining to users picking up random flash drives and plugging them into their home or corporate issued machine, only to find out it was infected with some form of malware, leading to a compromised machine. With device control, you can shut these ports down or whitelist specific drives to easily control what hardware is being attached to your corporate assets. Want to know what third-party software is hogging resources on a user's machine? With software and hardware inventory built in, you can get a picture of what software users are installing on their machines or identify what users may need a hardware refresh. We all wish everything can be done through automation, but sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes we need to access a user's machine to triage and remediate the issue. We have you covered here as well by providing a cyber protection desktop, which creates a secure tunnel to the machine, allowing you quick remote access. Vulnerability scanning and patch management quickly identifies missing patches or vulnerabilities that exist in your environment through regular scans. Once complete, our single agent solution allows you to patch these vulnerabilities. More importantly, our integrated cyber protection platform grants you the ability to perform a pre-update backup, which allows for quick rollback to the most recent point in time in the event of a blue screen of death, corrupt installation, or potential boot loops. Does your DR documentation have the same page count as the Encyclopedia Britannica? You're not alone. We've all been there. Our disaster recovery platform provides you with enterprise features at small business costs with zero heavy lifting. Run a backup to our cloud, assign some CPU and RAM, and you're ready to fail over a machine. It's that simple. Dreading dusting off that novel-esque disaster recovery SOP? No need. Our runbooks can be used to automate your entire failover strategy, removing complex procedures and human error from the equation. This leads to predictable outcomes and a little less stress when dealing with a down event.
Excellent. Thank you, Colin, for that informative demo. I know you squeezed through a bunch of different features there very quickly. I want to also give a shout out to your team, JD, Joshua, yourself, who've been answering questions. We had close to 100 questions so far as part of this event. And again, we're going to answer all those and respond back accordingly. We're in the wrap-up portion here. I got a couple things to take you through. We're going to pop up another poll before we transition into some resources we want to make sure people have access to. But ultimately, I want to get your poll feedback here. What is your direct experience in terms of ransomware attacks? No evidence of an attempted attack, have evidence of an unsuccessful attack, an attack contained, but you squashed it, an attack succeeded, but you recovered, didn't pay the Bitcoin ransom, or an attack succeeded and you paid the ransom and who knows what happened after that. But ultimately, some good poll questions there. We'd love to get your feedback. We always love hearing what our attendees have to say as far as these poll questions. So go ahead and answer that poll. We'll then transition into some complimentary resources that we want to provide to everybody that's joined the session today. I think we had, well over 500 people join today, which is fantastic. We've got some questionnaires you can use with for security assessment. We've got a data sheet on Cyber Protect Cloud, allowing you to also check out an ebook about mitigating software vendor supply chain security risks, and then tag security annual second quarter 2021 market outlook and industry insights. This is just a portion of what we have on our website, so feel free to go to www.acronis.com and get the latest and greatest information there. We are popping back up the results here. Looks like the majority of you have no evidence of an attempted attack. So congratulations. Hopefully you're 100% certain of that. 21%, 48 respondees have evidence of an unsuccessful attack, like unopened phishing emails. I'm surprised that's that low. I would think that that number might even be higher. An attack began, but we contained it. Congratulations, great work. You're using the right tools and you've got an educated workforce. An attack succeeded, but you recovered it. And then we got an unfortunate 9 people that had an attack succeed and that actually paid the ransom to recover. So this is real world stuff. We're not just talking about fake news here. This is stuff that's actually happening. So thank you everybody for joining today. Just one thing I want to point out before we close this session. Again, it will be recorded and sent along to you. But we do want to leave the world in a better place. If you have the opportunity to, a few bucks goes a very, very, very long way. Scan the QR code here, make a small donation to the Acronis Cyber Foundation. We've built a number of schools in impoverished areas all across the world, trying to give kids a bit of an advantage and a step up to put their lives into a better position. It's a really fantastic program. I myself have participated in it. Some of my teammates have gone on actual school builds in various parts of the world. It's a tremendous foundation. It's doing a lot of great things. And the next thing we want to do is start providing computer classes to these less fortunate kids. So please take the time, scan the code, $10, $20, $5,000 goes a very, very long way. Appreciate your support in that. Thank you all for attending today. Have a great day and download a copy of Acronis Cyber Protect and protect your infrastructure today.
No tenemos una seguridad. La escuela vieja está deteriorada, las tablas están podridas, Las paredes totalmente destruidas.
Acronis Cyber Foundation ले चाहिँ नि हाम्रो भवन बनाएर हामीलाई हस्तान्तरण गरेर त्यसको
Realmente esta nueva escuela es una bendición para los niños y para la comunidad.
Y es un futuro para...
Me gusta mi nueva escuela porque tiene mucho espacio, la van a pintar, es grande.
Agradecerles mucho y más que agradecerles.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Thank you to everybody who's come on board to support girls' education in South Africa.
Thank you.
Gracias a Acronis y donantes.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Thank you for Malam Shaba. Thank you for support my school.
Pues nos sentimos, mire, agradecidos con Dios, con este organismo.